So I'm finally able to get back around to this one. I've been seeing a lot of people put this up because it's a pretty huge deal considering that there's been very little direct sequel information about Shirou beyond Fate Stay Night. But recently we just got our very first reveal of Shirou in El Malloy. Now his name has been brought up before in the series, but this is the actual first appearance. And as you can see, it's really Shirou. It's not Emiya. It's not some type of counterpart. This is truly a direct Shirou after the events of Fate Stay Night. So how did we get here? What exactly does this mean? What has Shirou been doing all these years after the series ended? So if you didn't know, and I've talked about this a little bit before, there is a series that follows Waver called the El Malloy Case Files. The first part of it takes place around the time that Stay Night goes on, and then the second part takes place some years after the end of Stay Night and Case Files. This is the adventures of El Malloy. So the Shirou that we're seeing here would be around 20. And to preface this with a few things that we already knew before his appearance, he did end up going to the clock tower. This is not directly tied to any of the routes. It's not tied to Fate, UB-Dub, or Heaven's Field. It's a sequel that takes the Grail War into account, but in a circumstance where he survived and he went on to the clock tower with Rin as one of her disciples. Now you'll notice that a part of this is something that we actually get to see in UB-Dub. We see them both go to the clock tower in the epilogue. As a matter of fact, there's a conversation where Shirou bumped into Waver and they have a few words with each other. It does take these things into consideration, but again, not directly coming straight from the routes. It more so recognizes that they happen as their own thing, as its own separate timeline in Case Files. So beyond the fact that we know that he went to the clock tower with Rin and continued his studies, we also know that he became a butler for Luvia. Now if you guys forgot about Luvia, she is a part of the Edelfelt family. She's one of Rin's cousins, and you know they have their playful arch rivalry going on. And in between Stay Night ending, she ended up hiring Shirou because for one, she already knows about his work ethic, and then two, she's actually just as obsessed with Shirou as everybody else, including Rin. So a lot of this is the harem protagonist EX at work. She thought it would be a good way to get close to Shirou. But beyond that, where the picture comes from is the fact that Shirou has been sent on a recent mission to meet up with Van Fem. Van Fem is somebody that we haven't talked about too much, but in the Tsukihime worlds, he is one of the many dead apostle ancestors, one of the highest dead apostles you can be. And he actually runs his own casino. He has a boat over in Monaco, Europe. So what Luvia has done is sent out Shirou as her representative to investigate what Van Fem has going on at the casino. He calls it Fem's Casa, and it's this huge gambling event that he's been hosting every week for about 100 years at this location. And if you manage to win the event altogether, he'll grant you something of your desires as long as it's within his means. The only thing is, nobody ever wins. The people that have actually succeeded, you can count them on one hand after these 100 years, just to show you what type of odds you're working with. Well, as it turns out, and this is just going off of the highlights from the new volume because the full volume hasn't been translated yet, it turns out that Shirou actually beat him. He beat Van Fem himself. You gotta have EX luck. The thing about that is, when Van Fem asked him what he wanted as his wish, Shirou told him he didn't want anything. So he just left without his prize. And Van Fem felt indebted to him because, you know, he won. So it's like he wanted to do that for him. Now, whether or not Van Fem has some type of ulterior motives with the person that wins is yet to be disclosed, because when you think about it, the person that wins obviously is different from everybody else, and that could serve as great use to him. And I'm pretty sure we don't know what happened to those few people that won. For all we know, it could be a ploy to up his foundation. I mean, this has to be a smart dude to be around for this long. He's at least 2,000 years old and reached the level that he has. chance. One of the main reasons that Shirou went is because he didn't want to waste the $1 million ticket that it took to get into the event. By the way, the event is $1 million, but Luvia has that covered because she's rich. Shirou comes from a modest background, so it makes a lot of sense that he wouldn't want that to go to waste. And even she said in Ataraxia that she doesn't want to waste that much. So here's the thing. Shirou leaves and then he ends up going missing. But it's not what you think. It's not because of Van Film. Shirou gets abducted by the mafia. Huh? My life is really a movie. The last time anybody saw him, he was trying to protect a young girl, natural thing for Shirou to do, and then he just disappeared. So you got Van Film looking for Shirou, trying to give him his reward. You got members from the Wandering Sea trying to find Shirou so they can get the secret out of him on how he was able to beat Van Film, because that's obviously very crucial information. You got Ren and Luvia looking for Shirou, and they find out that this quote-unquote mob have these special pills that allows them to turn into animals and fight, and he ends up getting saved by an acquaintance of the girl that he tried to protect. And that's the picture that we see him having the wounds while he's so roughed up, but it appears that he's taking it like a champ. I gotta say, the acquaintance, who is a female, helps him fight the mafia off and take Shirou to her hideout. The reason that the mafia got Shirou in the first place is because there was recently a member of the Wandering Sea that was assassinated, and at the scene what they found was an origin bullet. Now of course Kirisugu is long gone by this time, but knowing that Shirou is the son of Kirisugu, they just assumed that he had some type of connection to that, or at least they could get some information out of him. So they grabbed him as soon as they could. And see me, I be thinking too much. So I would believe that the girl that saved me is actually in cahoots with the mafia. You think that she saved you when she's actually the one that you need to be worried about. The girl that I tried to save was a plant. I mean, if they know that he's Kirisugu's son, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to say they would know how he'd react. This is a setup, but that's just me being too skeptical. One of the most interesting things about this segment that's being revealed to us now as everything is unfolding is that all of this has been foreshadowed in Nasu's earlier works. Back in Hollow Ataraxia, which was a sequel spin-off to Stay Night, there was a part of the story where we found out more about the chest of Zelrech and how Ren has it in her possession at her crib because of the Tosaka family ties to Zelrech. So she had the chest at her house. And the thing about this chest is that it embodies the same concept as his true magic. Just like the Kaleidosticks, just like his gem sword, it has the ability to manipulate alternate worlds. So by sheer chance, Ren and Shirou end up locking themselves in the chest and they're just stuck inside of it. But the chest inside is like an actual world. And since the chest runs on the concept of Zelrech's magic, it can also manipulate the things inside of it. So they decide to call for help, and what they end up actually doing is calling an alternate Stay Night 3 years into the future and actually talking on the phone with them. So Shirou from Stay Night is talking to Taiga 3 years into the future, then he talks to Luvia 3 years into the future, and that's where the whole Van Fem incident gets revealed. Mind you, this came out in 2005. So again, Nasu is always playing the long game, and it's already been stated that he's working with the writer of Case Files to kind of incorporate a lot of the untouched ideas that weren't able to be realized directly after Stay Night, and a lot of those are being implemented in things like Strange Fate and in places like here, El Malloy, for example. So you got Luvia on the phone yelling at him, oh, you know, it's been over an hour, you've been taking your sweet time, you're supposed to be a representative for me at Van's casino event. So in this time that he's calling this future Luvia, this supposed alternate world is the same event that we're experiencing in volume 6 of part 2 El Malloy right now. You can see Shirou is actually on the cover, and they tried to keep it low key until the images finally started to surface. Really interesting play on this older material. But going off of what Luvia is saying in Hollow Ataraxia, Shirou is supposed to scope out the scene until Van Fem actually shows himself, and then Luvia is gonna pop up herself and then see what she can get out of it. But it turned out to be a lot deeper than that. Another thing that has to be pointed out is the relationship between Ren and Shirou in this alternate world. Apparently, Ren is head over heels for Shirou. By her own words, they haven't seen each other in a while. We're already past the part where they initially go to the clock tower together. Again, this isn't supposed to be following any route, so it's not like they were that close as they were in UB-Dub, but Ren still ended up having, you know, those deep feelings for Shirou even outside of the routes, is what they're basically saying. So he's talking to future Ren and she's saying, I can't wait to see you. I can barely sleep because I keep thinking about you. I'll do anything that you ask me to once we get together. And usually you guys know that I'm paraphrasing, but she's actually saying this verbatim. That's the crazy part about it. She's saying this word for word. And here you have present time Ren trying to figure out who's on the other side of the phone and why Shirou is making the faces that he's making. It's so funny, bro. This entire scene with the chess has to be one of the best moments in Fate, slice of life wise and ataraxia wise. And then we have the ultimate meta where Ren gets into an argument on the phone with her future self. Addressing a little bit more on Van Fem, he is a master puppeteer. He's one of the many people that showed up in the French incident that appeared in Tsukihime. The French incident being where a bunch of dead apostle ancestors showed up at Ciel's hometown and started terrorizing it to the point where Ciel was one of the only survivors and he was present. You can actually see him with his top hat and his cane in the silhouette alongside his golem daughters. He shows up in Fate Strange Fate later on in the story. Flat actually gets into contact with him and he's the reason that we actually find out Jester's true identity, that Jester was originally a female by the name of Dorothea. The reason why Van Fem knows is because Jester is actually a descendant of Van Fem. So Van Fem is the reason why Jester from Strange Fate, the one that you saw in Whispers of Dawn, Van Fem is the reason why he's a dead apostle. So that's a huge lore connect right there. And you can see just from this alone how much there is to extrapolate from his character. But ultimately, as far as his demeanor goes, he turned into a dead apostle to further his magecraft. But from what we understand, he's supposed to be pro-human. And when you talk to him, he's actually a pretty cool dude. He's leagues away from what you would think of the average dead apostle, which is extremely self-serving and usually up to no good. Another thing is that everybody that's working for him at this casino, at least the main casino, is all supposed to be dead apostles. So when Shirou went there, he was surrounded by nothing but dead apostles. Really glad that he did win and there was no actual confrontation, because that would have been some bad business. But Van Fem likes him, so he was more than likely in good hands anyway. Plus, the situation with the mafia ended up being an equally bad circumstance. We didn't miss out on any of that. By the way, it's heavily implied that Shirou is a gamer. At least 1/3 of all of Flat's gaming collection originally came from Shirou. My boy Shirou is about his money. He's trying to get that steak deal. He's trying to get that kick deal. He's putting in that work.